The quick pitch that isn't. Hi everyone, it's Lynn. We're going to talk about this. We actually had a podcast several years ago discussing this exact situation we're going to talk about with the umpire who was involved in this play like 3 years later. Wild. But first, let's just watch the ejection.
Balls love getting to use the lightsaber as part of the celebration. That hit Burke. And Buckner's thrown out of the game.
It all happened so quickly, but yeah, that's part of the video. Hits the batter in the lower leg. Be sure to watch the bench's reaction from this angle.
And obviously we don't have sound piped into it, so maybe something happened in between, but...
From an umpire's standpoint, I just want to point out the plate umpire here is Brian DeBrouwer, who we've had on Close Call before for teachable time alongside Jeff Gosney, T-Mac. Pay no attention to the weirdo on the top right of the video who works mostly basketball ever since she had a concussion. I don't know how do pronouns work again? Weird. But the point I'm making with all of this background information that seems superfluous is simply to say this is an extremely experienced umpire behind home plate who has very extensive professional and collegiate top-level experience, so he can tell he's quite adept at picking out unsporting situations and enforcing NCAA's rule without hesitation when a pitcher intentionally pitches at the batter. How does he know that this is intentional? Well, let's go through the sequence. In super slow-mo, we see the pitcher has started the windup before the batter stands still. Now, the rule isn't about the batter becoming static and stationary, it's about the batter being alert and in an imminent hitting stance. We have the batter facing the pitcher. The preparatory swing is done. The batter can move the bat back into position to quickly prepare to hit the pitch. So unlike the Max Scherzer play from the other day, this is not a quick pitch. This is legal. Our plate umpire knows this and thus allows the pitch to go through. It's a foul ball. Keep in mind, college also has a pitch clock. After the pitch, the batter will say something to the pitcher who then kind of glares at him silently for a while, but it gets the umpire's attention. You see him rushing to get between the two players. So there's a tense of, uh-oh, tension. And that's why when the next pitch uncharacteristically beelines towards the batter's ankle, the ejection is immediate and unwavering. If there was any doubt whatsoever in the umpire's mind, you'd have warnings. But because the umpire has the experience to know what's going on here and sense it right away, it's a quick ejection and a correct call by rule, especially with NCAA baseball that really doesn't like anything escalating on sportsmanship things are concerned. So at that level, this is even more appropriate than, say, at the professional level, when we've talked about how MLB tacitly tolerates or actually even promotes fighting. Not so in college.
It's gone. Tossed by Brian DeBrouwer, home plate umpire.
And if you're both of these, it's an interesting situation, and obviously we don't have sound piped into it, so maybe something happened in between, but...
At the beginning of this video, I said that we recorded a podcast a few years ago with Brian DeBrouwer, the umpire, featured here, regarding a very similar play. The play was from Major League Baseball. Johnny Cueto was the pitcher, Gerardo Parra was the batter, and there was sort of a cat and mouse game going on regarding pitch cadences, calling time, the rhythm. But there was one key difference. There was no pitch clock back then. And we discussed the umpire's strategy to try to manage the game. Call time if you need to. Do things that sort of reset the situation, get everyone on the same page. Tell the catcher, hey, slow down. You're going to hear this all in the discussion, but we can't do it anymore because there's a pitch clock. So that aspect of game management is taken away. And as you're going to hear in the discussion, these types of unsporting situations can explode quite quickly, especially now that we don't have a game management tool to mitigate it.
This is a simple game of cat and mouse. And I put this in here, guys, because this drives me nuts. I see this a lot on the college level of a pitcher who wants to work quickly and a batter who's slow, and an umpire who doesn't really have control of the catcher or the game. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this because these are two players that know each other well, and Johnny Cueto and Parra, Baby Shark, as many people know him now. And this is a pretty good umpire, Jim Reynolds, behind the plate, who can't seem to get on the same page here. We've all been part of this where a batter and a pitcher and now a catcher. So how do we prevent this from happening, guys?
Initially, there's no issue. It was just, Parra was like, hey, my bad. I wasn't ready. I wasn't set. If this were me and as the plate umpire, I'd probably hold off just a touch longer to put the ball back in play.
Just gonna butt in to say, see what I'm saying about the pitch clock? Umpires really can't just arbitrarily call time anymore.
There's no problem with Cueto getting on the rubber, getting ready to go, and still having the hand up from calling time. I'm not saying using the time, a do not pitch is without formally calling time. Just hesitate. I would probably err on the side of hesitating a touch longer till I knew that Parra's pre-pitch routine was, that he was ready.
So that's the first issue. You can't just have your hand up holding things because you have a clock running and you are being directed by your boss essentially to adhere to that clock as often as you can. So that takes a huge tool away from the umpire's kit to try to manage the game when it's this cat and mouse who's going to be ready first thing.
For the lower levels, for college, if you've got a decent relationship, if you've had some communication with your catcher throughout the game, just tell him, be like, Brian, just wait for the batter to be ready before you give a sign. And the interesting thing about this play, I don't know if you went back and noticed, there was no sign given after the initial time, after the initial call time. Who's that catching? Posey? He doesn't give another sign. Posey's looking around, looking down third base. He never gives another sign. So that's kind of, you can usually try to steer the catcher like, hey, wait to put the sign down until the batter's ready. But in this instance, they're going with the same pitch. Posey's not even giving another sign. So you kind of have to take the brunt of that as the umpire. You can't really try to coach them into holding up if we're not putting a sign down.
Just like Jeff says about not putting a sign down, with a pitch clock, even if when they are putting a sign down, you still can't tell them to hold off as a game management tool because they've got to beat the clock just like everyone else. It's a new era, and game management is harder to come by when you have a clock on your back.
How can we make sure, Brian, that this doesn't turn into some kind of thing where a manager or a head coach, the case may be, is yelling at us, the catcher's mad at us, the batters are mad at us? These tend to blow up a lot quicker than people realize.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can make sure. We can do the things that Jeff said, right? We can hold the ball up from putting it in play just a little bit longer. We can talk to the catcher. If you recognize early that you're dealing with a less experienced catcher, I think that's a good opportunity to kind of walk them through like why we're doing that, right? So I'll say to them, hey, I'm just going to keep calling time if you guys are going too quickly. So why don't we just wait a second and let the batter get ready? And then I don't have to keep calling time all day and we can get back to playing baseball. So that's something that I've found myself doing more of in college baseball than in professional baseball. If I said that to a professional catcher, he'd probably turn around and laugh at me. But if I say that to some freshman who's getting his first start of the season on a Tuesday midweek, he's going to appreciate the fact that I'm helping him out, that I'm communicating with him like a human being and kind of explaining my perspective on things. So that's the only thing I would add.
Brian DeBrouwer, the director of training for United Umpires, Jeff Gosney, in a similar capacity, a lot of different titles and that stuff. Let's just tell you that these are two of the smartest brains when it comes to breaking down umpiring. Glad they were able to spend a few minutes with us.
History repeats itself, right? Anyway, I thought it was super interesting that we talked about like this exact type of a situation 2 years ago, except we had a tool in our toolkit that we no longer have, really, thanks to the clock. Unintended consequences for the pitch clock. Super interesting. Anyway, what do you think? Visit us online at closecallsports.com, Twitter and Facebook at Close Call Sports. Subscribe to the channel, please. It will help us out in giving you this type of content on a regular basis. We drill down on this stuff way too much, but as you see in college, it can take like 2 seconds to blow up, and then I can talk about it for the next 2 hours. We'll see you on the site.